Hi everybody. Abidjan used to wake up to the sound of traffic, markets, and restless city noise. But lately, something else rises with the sun. A soft call, a distant echo, a whisper that grows stronger every dawn. The azan. At first, people barely noticed. A few new mosques here, a handful of converts there. Nothing unusual. But soon, the city realized something was shifting beneath the surface. Something powerful, something alive. Shops that once opened with loud music now start their day with recitation. Young people who once wandered without direction now gather in quiet study circles. Families who never cared for religion suddenly search for meaning, returning to traditions they once ignored. Nobody expected it. Not the politicians, not the sociologists, not even the imams. But the movement was real. "What's happening to the country?" one radio host asked. The answer was everywhere. Islam was rising, steadily, peacefully, irresistibly. Not through force, not through pressure, but through something far more contagious: hope. People saw Muslims organizing food drives, helping the poor, protecting neighbors during difficult times. They saw communities strengthened, friendships rebuilt, families finding peace. And one by one, citizens from every background, traders, farmers, students, workers, began walking toward the nearest mosque, quietly seeking answers. The whisper had become a heartbeat. And that heartbeat was spreading through all of Côte d'Ivoire. The nation didn't know it yet, but it was standing at the beginning of a transformation that would reshape its identity for the next century. The change sweeping across Côte d'Ivoire did not come from a single moment. It came like the tide, slow, steady, unstoppable. And behind that tide were two powerful forces. Number one, the journey of the migrants. For decades, men and women from Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea crossed into Côte d'Ivoire, seeking work, safety, and new beginnings. They came as farmers, merchants, builders, and dreamers. But they brought something else with them: their faith. They prayed in small rented rooms. They taught their children Quran at night after exhausting shifts. They gathered in dusty courtyards, whispering zikr under the stars. People watched them, how they lived, how they shared, how they treated one another. Why do they always look calm? Why are their families so close? Why do they never abandon each other? The questions spread, and curiosity became admiration. Number two, the call of the scholars. From the deserts of Mali to the forests of Côte d'Ivoire, scholars of Qadiriya and Tijaniya began traveling village to village, not with grand processions, not with politics, but with humility and wisdom. They sat on woven mats beside fishermen. They spoke with farmers under mango trees. They recited verses that touched even the hardest hearts. Wherever they went, crowds grew. Some came to listen, some came for answers, some came because they felt something inside them awakening. And slowly, the numbers began to shift, not quietly, but dramatically. Streets once known for nightlife became filled with evening study circles. Schools began opening Quranic classes for children. Elders in villages who once held tight to old traditions now spoke openly about embracing Islam. The government noticed, churches noticed, the world noticed, but no one could stop it because it wasn't an organization, it wasn't a program, it wasn't a strategy. It was a movement born from the hearts of the people. A movement that grew faster than analysts could measure. A movement that united the poor, the wealthy, the educated, and the forgotten. And as the waves of migration and wisdom collided, something extraordinary happened. Côte d'Ivoire began to rediscover its soul. What began as individual stories was becoming a national awakening. And this awakening was only just beginning. The dawn light broke over Abidjan like a curtain of gold. On that morning, something massive stood at the heart of the city, something no one could ignore. A structure of marble and light, a monument of faith and unity, a mosque unlike anything the nation had ever seen. People gathered by the thousands, filling the streets. Some climbed rooftops just to catch a glimpse. Children sat on their fathers' shoulders. Elderly men wept as they watched the final touches placed on the Great Dome. It wasn't just a building, it was a statement. Islam had become a pulse in the heart of Côte d'Ivoire, and the mosques proved it. The Great Mosque in Abidjan was only the beginning. In cities, towns, and dusty villages, masjids rose like seeds sprouting after rain. But these weren't just places for prayer. They became schools for children, where the alphabet and Quran were learned side by side. Community kitchens, feeding the poor long before the government arrived. Safe havens, where women could seek advice and protection. Courts of wisdom, where disputes were settled with fairness. Hubs of hope, where young men found purpose instead of trouble. The transformation was so visible that even those who doubted could no longer deny it. A taxi driver whispered to a passenger, "Every week I see a new mosque, every week a new class of students. Something is happening here. Something big." One night during Ramadan, the city witnessed a scene that would be remembered for decades. The mosques were packed beyond capacity, glowing with lanterns and soft recitation. From the hills of Yapougon to the shores of Treichville, the sound of Quran blended with the night wind. People poured into the streets to pray. Families gathered under open tents. Imams spoke with voices trembling with emotion. It felt less like a religious gathering and more like a nation rediscovering its identity. That night, even those who stood far away felt something warm stirring inside their hearts. The mosques had done something no political leader could ever achieve. They united the people. By the time the giant mosque finally opened its doors to the public, the message was clear. Islam was no longer a quiet presence. It was a guiding light, shaping culture, guiding youth, strengthening families, and healing wounds long ignored. And for the first time in generations, Côte d'Ivoire felt like it was standing at the edge of a new dawn. What came next would change everything. The whispers began in the back alleys of Abidjan. At first, just rumors, soft, uncertain, unbelievable. Did you hear about the musician? They say the district mayor took shahada. A famous TV host? No way! Impossible! But then the truth came out. One by one, and then by the hundreds, people began stepping into the light. Not quietly, not secretly, but boldly. It started with a young man known in his neighborhood only as Koba. He was feared, raised on the streets, living from fight to fight, his fists speaking louder than his words. One evening, after months of watching the growing Muslim community that helped orphans and fed the hungry, he walked into a small mosque in Côte. Inside, he found silence. For the first time in his life, he felt peace. Witnesses later said he trembled as he pronounced the shahada, tears dripping onto the carpet he once thought he'd never enter. The video went viral. People were shocked. If a man like that can change, then anyone can. The nation began to talk, not in arguments, not in conflict, but in curiosity. Then came the unexpected. A university professor, known for his sharp critiques of religion, publicly announced, "I studied Islam academically. I didn't expect it to touch my heart." Students erupted in applause. Debates on campuses turned into late-night study circles. Young men and women who once had no interest in religion began showing up at mosques, quietly taking notes, asking questions, searching for truth. The moment that changed everything happened live on television. A beloved cultural figure, one of the most respected men in the country, was invited for a routine interview. But halfway through the show, he paused. His voice cracked. The studio lights seemed to dim. He looked into the camera and said, "For years I searched for peace. I found it in Islam." The studio fell silent. The nation held its breath. Millions of viewers felt their hearts shake. It wasn't a celebrity moment. It was a confession from the soul. The next morning, mosques overflowed with people seeking guidance. In markets, in schools, in high-rise offices, in remote villages, mothers brought their sons, husbands came with their wives, friends walked together, holding trembling hands as they whispered the shahada for the first time. Imams cried, elders rejoiced, communities celebrated. Islam was no longer rising quietly. It was blooming, openly, beautifully, powerfully. And the nation watched, stunned by the sheer emotion of it all. Because these were not forced conversions, not political moves, not trends. They were transformations of the heart. Transformations that would lead Côte d'Ivoire toward a future no one had predicted. The movement was no longer just growing. It was unstoppable. The sun rose over Côte d'Ivoire with a new kind of light, warm, steady, and full of promise. Something had shifted in the soul of the nation. It wasn't just a religious trend. It wasn't merely social change. It felt like rebirth. From Abidjan's shining skyline to the quiet cocoa villages deep inland, the signs were everywhere. Children who once grew up on the streets now spent their afternoons in Quranic classes, reciting verses with confidence. Teenagers who once felt lost now found direction, purpose, and identity. University students, armed with knowledge and faith, began shaping conversations about ethics, justice, and compassion. Teachers noticed it. Parents felt it. The government quietly acknowledged it. A generation was rising, confident, disciplined, united. And everywhere you looked, Islam was not just practiced. It was lived. Mosques continued to grow, but so did something far more powerful: solidarity. Communities fed the poor before waiting for official aid. Youth groups volunteered in hospitals, cleaned streets, built wells, and rebuilt broken homes. Neighbors protected one another during difficult times regardless of tribe or background. People began to say with pride, "This is the Côte d'Ivoire we always dreamed of." And for the first time in decades, the dream felt real. Islam didn't erase culture, it revived it. Traditional music returned with spiritual meaning. Artisans carved wooden pieces inspired by Quranic themes. Poets wrote verses about unity, peace, and identity. Even fashion transformed, modern, elegant, yet proudly rooted in heritage. It was a fusion the world had not seen before. Modern but humble, traditional but progressive, religious but welcoming. A distinctly Ivorian Islam, a new cultural identity. International analysts were stunned. How did a country once divided by conflict become a center of stability? How did young people in one of Africa's busiest nations find such clarity and purpose? How did Islam grow so rapidly, yet so peacefully? The answer was simple. Hearts opened, minds awakened, communities united. It wasn't a revolution of force, it was a revolution of light. As the call to prayer echoed across the evening sky, from Abidjan to Bouaké, from Daloa to San Pedro, the nation paused. People stopped in markets. Drivers turned off their engines. Children raised their heads, listening. The sound wasn't just a call to worship. It was the heartbeat of a reborn nation. A nation stronger, a nation wiser, a nation guided by faith, compassion, and unity. Côte d'Ivoire had discovered something precious, a path forward.